Welcome back to No Kings on the Hill, and good evening. I'm Dr. Hill, and thanks again for joining us on another Wednesday night. Tonight, we are going to discuss how Iran has selected a new supreme leader after the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. However, this regime insider is not a religious cleric rising to the ranks of Iran's Islamic clergy like his father. Instead, the unelected assembly of experts voted his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, into power, prompting concerns over royal takeover of Iran. If you are new here, please make sure to follow or subscribe, depending on how you're watching the show, and check out our website at nokingsonthehill with drlaw.com, where you can subscribe to one of our 3 plans to help support the show, participate in subscriber-only lives and Discord chats, access our weekly blog, get a chance to be a guest once a month, and vote on what topics you would like to see covered next. Don't forget, we will be broadcasting live from CPAC March 25th to the 28th for 2 hours each day on the Patriots Prayer Network. And also check out all the other superstar Christian conservative talent on the network. Stop by and say hello for a chance to get a free shirt or hat. 3 crises, 1 question. Is America influence being tested like never before? We will get into these topics after a word from our sponsors.
Heard of Q broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Stars. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
All right, hold on 1 second. There we go. All right, so rarely does instability erupt as just one point along geopolitical fault lines. More often, multiple fractures appear across the globe. Discrete events that, when viewed collectively, point to underlying structural changes. We seem to be on the cusp of just such a phase. Iran will get us started. Last week's assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was about more than toppling Iran's most powerful politicians. It also set the Islamic Republic up for its first genuine succession crisis within its ruling elites since the first Ayatollah died back in 1989. According to the Iranian constitution, the supreme leader is chosen by the Assembly of Experts. The 88-member clergy-like council decides who gets to be God's speaker in Iran. The regime has been led by an interim leader for days as the Assembly of Experts convened to pick Khamenei's successor. Well, now we have an answer. The Assembly chose Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, to replace his father, and that decision has profound consequences. For starters, Mojtaba Khamenei has never served in a significant elected position within the Islamic Republic. Instead, his power had historically been derived from informal channels largely linked to Iran's security apparatus, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Secondly, this move introduces an element of dynastic rule into a government purpose-built to eliminate monarchy from Iranian politics. Iran's 1979 revolution deposed a king Now, the son of Iran's former supreme leader will serve as the highest ranking official in the Islamic Republic. Third, perhaps most significantly, Mojtaba's support base is rumored to be drawn largely from Iran's security and intelligence agencies rather than from the clergy. This could signal a shift in the very nature of Iran's regime. Iran has long been considered a theocracy. Iran's political system has been defined by clerics who determine who can govern. If power continues to consolidate among the Revolutionary Guard and the security services, Iran could take on the characteristics of another form of government, a military rule, ideological state. Leadership changes during wartime can be extremely dangerous periods in history. Incoming leaders may believe that they need to prove their strength in order to cement their rule. They may use foreign aggression to strengthen domestic rule, which brings us back to Iran. Tehran's foreign policy is powered by proxy forces it controls throughout the Middle East. From Lebanon to Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, Iran could kickstart a new phase of hostilities by leveraging these groups. Step back and think geopolitically now. As headlines explode over turmoil in the Middle East, a worsening crisis is brewing in another corner of the globe. China has quietly built up its naval forces and deployed missiles specifically designed to contain U.S. military activity around Taiwan. Called anti-access area denial, this sort of force structure deters U.S. intervention by making it too costly to come to Taiwan's defense. Taiwan is much more than a regional hotspot. It's a keystone of security in the Indo-Pacific. If China invaded and annexed Taiwan, it would change the balance of power throughout the Pacific region. And as we've seen time and time again, when the world's attention is elsewhere, nations will act. Great power competition often intensifies in one region as adversaries exploit distractions elsewhere. Now consider what that means for America. Just as geopolitical hotspots are flaring up around the world, the Department of Homeland Security is running out of money as Congress remains deadlocked. Congress has the power of the purse. It's one of the main tools the legislative branch has to check the executive branch. But yet they can't seem to get their act together. But one thing modern shutdown politics has also made clear, polarization has reached a point where agencies charged with protecting our national security can find themselves working amid funding uncertainty and institutional limbo. The workers stay on the job, the planes still fly, but the signal being sent to the world is not subtle. America has the greatest military might in history, but our political system is increasingly incapable of delivering steady governance when it needs to. And while each of these stories derives its own moment in the spotlight, taken as a whole, they prompt a bigger question. Are we watching a point where internal political deadlock coincides with intensified competition abroad? Because when that happens, the world order starts to change. We want to take a look at those three tonight. So, Mojtaba Khamenei and the threat of escalation in Iran, we'll start with that. China's show of force in Taiwan and what it means for a potential conflict in the Pacific. And then obviously at home, what the DHS shutdown tells us about American political crises. So let's begin with our first topic, Iran. We're joined by Joe with the first installment of bringing you from this. He's former intelligence, so I'm going to bring up Joe here in a second. And we'll start with Iran. When Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was assassinated, Iran's assembly of experts wasted no time in naming his successor. All right, so the selection of Mojtaba Khamenei has caught many watchers off guard as it places the slain leader's son atop a political system that had prided itself on ousting monarchs. Mojtaba's history with the Revolutionary Guard also signals that the military might take on an even greater role in determining Iran's course of action. Joe, as power shifts within authoritarian regimes can be times of weakness and strength. Is Mojtaba Khamenei solidifying control of the regime, or do you believe his ascension could cause fissures within the regime that may impact Iran's foreign policy decisions? And there you go. Ahead. You can talk. Or maybe it won't. Okay.
You can hear me now, right?
Yeah, I was trying to keep you in the background like I did the other day, but it wouldn't let me do it. That's where, are you there? There we go. I'm sorry, I was trying to get you out of the stage, get on the dual. There we go.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. You're the expert on the dual screen.
Oh, I'm using on my solo. I'm using my OBS background, so my picture's bigger, but last time I got it to work to where you were just voice in the background like you were calling in versus it just showing your picture. And that's what I was trying to do, is the same as last time.
Yeah, I would prefer that. But so to answer your question, what I'd say is primarily what you have to realize is going on is that yeah, there is a conflict and a war going on overseas in Iran, but there's also a conflict and war that's being waged out globally, and this is an information war. And the various players have different interests, and they want you to believe a certain thing. So obviously, the United States is pushing propaganda that no, they do not want this guy in power. And then you have people in the Iranian sphere who obviously want to push them. But with any secession, I would say that I suspect that he's not universally accepted. I know that there is some, degree of resistance to him being the son of the last Ayatollah. So historically, the first Ayatollah was the mentor of the second Ayatollah. So I think it's also important to mention that, this third Ayatollah is that he's not made any media appearances. So to me, that strikes me as figurehead. He's figurehead.
Well, and
So
I know there was questions today whether, like, okay, is he still alive? Because he was supposedly in the palace when his dad lost his life, and there's rumors whether he was just severely injured, whether he had his leg amputated, or whether he's even still around, because they haven't like even gotten a picture of him most since the injury. So everybody's kind of questioning, is he really alive, or is this just a play to try to bring the factions together? So is this a play by the whatever was left of the 88
yeah, I think that
clerics
I
that
think
we didn't kill, whatever was left of them, that they're just trying to bring everybody together so you don't have all these rival IGRC factions? And maybe that's kind of why they used Khamenei's son at the time too, because he had that connection with the IRGC.
I think that's a factor. When we're analyzing this from an intelligence perspective, we have to step into the shoes of the people on the ground who are Iranian and in power. And yeah, I think that's a factor. You need a figurehead that everybody can rally behind. I don't think that he's universally loved or accepted. However, he does have some background as a former military member that fought in the Iran-Iraq War. What I will say though is that he is perfect in the sense that if he is dead or if he doesn't show his face a lot, then me as an Iranian, uh, if I'm truthfully in power, do I want to step up and say, make me Ayatollah? No, because that person is going to have a target on their head. So it very well could be that he's already dead. And I've seen a couple of videos out there where they're kissing, print out signs of him. And when we look at like the history of totalitarian regimes, whether it's, Mussolini, whether it's Hitler, whether it's Mao Zedong, they try to create this bigger than life figure. So, Italy had Big Brother where the eyes were staring at you, right, at all times. So it seems like Iran is implementing that to some degree. I don't think it really matters. I think that it signifies that there's at least a portion and element within Iran that's still resisting, and that is the key factor and element. It doesn't matter who's pulling the strings. It matters that someone is trying to pull the strings. So just the mere fact that they're choosing him and that he's kind of a throwback to his father shows that it's a signaling that they're going to keep resisting and fighting and trying to fall underneath that same color, that same ideology, and keep up what they're doing. So that's my takeaway. And because there's so little information about it, you have to be careful with what's being pushed towards you to influence you in a certain direction where you come to these conclusions. You say this is going to happen, xyz is going to happen. We don't know. We don't know. We haven't even heard this guy speak. We haven't even seen a picture of him. So to
Oh yeah,
me,
no. I mean, well, they've got
figurehead.
pictures of him, but they're old pictures. There's nothing new.
We have not seen a proof of life photo of this guy since the strikes began. And that's honestly that's kind of smart on Iran's part, because if he is dead, then that prevents a clear hierarchy or delineation of who is the next person being targeted. It gives that entire class of people underneath him who really would be the puppet string pullers anyway, right? It's the same thing. Donald Trump, he's the president, but he's over a large and expansive factions that have various interests. So in some ways he's beholden to that. We saw that today with Cornyn. We can get into that later, where he was against Save Act and now he's for the Save Act. So when people are in positions of power, like there's this entire theory, and international relations. It's like the keys to power. And once you're inside of dictatorship, or once you're inside this totalitarian system, even the people up top are hostage to what's unfolding, right? Just like a giant machine, where you hit the button, the gears start turning. Once the first gear turns, unless something completely breaks, the machine is destroyed. It's going to ultimately push that piston into place. So,
or or
that's
like
kind of what I see unfolding.
or like we saw this weekend with the Iranian women's soccer or girls soccer team in Australia, where I guess six of them somehow either their family had gotten out or they felt like it was safer to stay than go. The other ones, literally, whether they knew they were going to end up being killed or not when they got home, they went still left because obviously their parents and their families were being threatened if they didn't go back because I guess they decided to protest and not sing the national anthem or something while they were at the because of uh, the Ayatollah losing his life, and they kind of protested against it. And that was
They protested against the Ayatollah or against the war. I'm
well,
sorry.
no, they didn't like they failed to sing or stand up for the national anthem for Iran, and I forgot how else they protested, but I know originally there was a big thing about it didn't look like um, they were going to offer any type of asylum and anything. And then it came out that they had actually offered each one of them individually asylum, but I guess only six of them decided to stay because the rest of the team went back due to, I guess, that Iran was threatening their family or their parents or their kids or whatever. Pretty much, if they didn't come back, they were going to they would kill them, not just them lose their lives.
Well, I mean, that's pretty consistent with. I'm not going to necessarily. I'm not going to use black and white language where we said, every person in the Iranian regime is evil or anything like that. I don't believe in dehumanizing people. But when we look at their set of actions and we look at like the plan they had in place, they're targeting civilian infrastructure. They're trying to take out, you know, the various oil refineries around. They're attacking neutral third party countries. So this is, when you're a rat backed into a corner, everything looks like a threat, right? At this point, Iran is the Chihuahua, and they're just attacking everything they can. And of course, they're going to target, you know, innocent Iranian soccer players. But yeah, you're right. Like those girls had no other choice. If someone told me return home or your family's going to be executed, I'm gonna go home, and I'm okay facing that music myself. I don't want it to happen to my family personally. I think that's the other thing is that we can't forget the human element, and the majority of people who are working for serving underneath the regime, where they're what we're called military age males, right? They have no way to get food, they have no way to get water, they don't probably have jobs, and their society is falling apart because there's no infrastructure. So even though you know if fire's raining down upon them, there's not much like what are they supposed to do? Like this is why I've been advocating like there has to be a concrete plan put in place, and more than just the former Shah giving out speeches telling the Iranian people to rise up, or Netanyahu rise up. Like someone has to go in and implement structure. There has to be some sort of transition period, and I don't want boots on the ground. I don't want U.S. troops on the ground, but until there's an alternative, the there's kind of traumatic memory. People will default back to what they know, which is unfortunately the current
I,
regime.
I think we're still looking at Iran. I think we're still looking as far as boots on the ground as Israel and the Kurds and the United States providing air support and ruling the air and the seas, and then providing air support as the Kurds or Israel marches through and deals with the ground door to door type fighting. I don't
I,
foresee this being anything like uh, Israel for us. Now, obviously, Trump's goal was to have it be kind of like Venezuela, but unfortunately, with it being an ideological theocracy, not a just dictatorship, that didn't quite work. And the only way that he's going to get Iran not to be the way it was is to eliminate all vestiges of the Islamic State government, or at least the radical side of it. And Iran would have to go either back to the prince or have to go back to some form of other government, democratic form of government, not this the Islamic theocracy that they have.
yeah.
But
So you also have to realize, like, okay, so a lot of people in the United States focus on upward mobility as a social issue, right? Like how many people were moving from poverty into the top 1%. But in order to go from poverty in the top 1%, you have to displace someone. So right now, in order for people to move up the hierarchy of Iran and take power, there's a group of people that will be displaced. And that's the issue, is that what is going to happen when those people are displaced? And we've already seen in the last 4 months, like, or I guess 2 months it is, that they've killed 40,000 people. So there's no one racing to the finish line going, raising their hand. It's the same thing with who's going to be the Ayatollah. They've got a guy who's reportedly already been killed. Like he's supposed to be dead for almost 2 weeks now, and he's being made the figurehead. So no one's racing to be the target right now. That's what I see. Is I see a lot of analysis paralysis. People are afraid to act. People are afraid to, but things are going to continue to disintegrate. I think that there's a willingness on the U.S. Israel side for total war. Like their infrastructure is being dismantled on a level that we really haven't seen since maybe Iraq. But that's all to say that if, again, I'm not somebody that's supportive. I'm not somebody that's against. I don't automatically support everything Donald Trump does. I don't automatically oppose it. I don't automatically support Rand or Ron Paul. But like with this, it really needs to be done quickly. We need to get in. We need to get our objectives done. If it succeeds, great. If it doesn't, Obama did the same thing in Libya, and that country. What? Can you still hear me?
Oh yeah, I got it to do it finally.
Okay. Yeah, and we did the same thing in Libya. We did the same thing in Syria, and Syria was in a civil war for over a decade. And like this fear of how it's going to impact our domestic politics, like unfortunately, this is just the process and how things shake up. But yeah, I think you're right. Surrounding countries need to step up, whether it's Iraqi militias, Kurdish militias. I don't think Israel is going to send its own people to die on the ground. I don't think that's realistic. I don't see the will there. Um, Beyond like the Mossad agents, I don't see the will with the American people beyond maybe special operations missions. But yeah, I- it's too soon to tell. As much as people want it, like every day, the preparation of the battle space is changing, and we have to have patience. But that's just how it goes. Don't feed into
Yep.
the fear either, though. That's what I will say. Do not buy into the fear.
All right, so let's move into our next topic, the Indo-Pacific. While there are tensions building in the Middle East, China is militarizing around Taiwan with ships and missiles. The strategy is simple: make it costly enough for America to where we don't want to intervene, that they'll think twice. So, Joe, some military thinkers fear that multiple crises can create opportunities for adversaries. If Beijing believes Washington is consumed by a crisis in the Middle East, would China intensify its pressure campaign against Taiwan? Do you think China is going to use this as a way to possibly try to regain Taiwan, which is what I've thought from the beginning, is
I
what they try
I
to use?
I see the opposite. I see that there's we saw it with Venezuela, we saw it with Iran, that Trump, again, Trump is sort of captive to his own strategy of saying, if you do this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And he's now shown the world 2 times over that if this happens, he's going to do this. So I think that we do have somewhat of a red line on Taiwan. I don't think China's ready to do it. I think they know they're not ready to do it. I think that they're definitely, there's this notion that America's spread thin, or, okay, yeah, we have a lot going on in Iran, but we have a ton of very powerful allies in that. We have Japan, we have India, we have South Korea, Australia right there. And the moment that that kicks off, the United States would shift its focus, and we would also start employing capabilities that we are trying not to employ in Iran, that we tested out in Venezuela. So I've always said China is a competitor to us, maybe economically. There is a competition going on a civilization level. I just don't see them as a military peer. I don't believe that's the case. If China is going to try to get Taiwan, I think their strategy is going to play out exactly what they did in other surrounding territories like Tibet or Hong Kong, where rather than taking overt military action, what they did is they infiltrated. And this is kind of similar to the strategy that the US was employing against Greenland, where they were basically poising Greenland and Denmark against each other. They were saying, look, Denmark's screwing Greenland over. We'll offer the citizens of Greenland or $100,000, right, if they're willing to join us. And China has those same soft power, manipulation, influence techniques that they can use on the citizens of Taiwan. And I don't know if this is 100% true. I've read that somewhere around 40% of the population of Taiwan, even their legislator is already pro CCP, pro China. So if China is going to take Taiwan, it doesn't have to be a outright invasion. And I think that if you look historically in terms of like Chinese strategy, they very rarely y- uh, go and do that. I think
Hey,
that that is
Joe, did you
yes.
see the question I popped up there? And I was going to see if you wanted what you think of that. This
That
is a
that's a
viewer
great
from Australia.
that's 100% a very good point because okay, United States has what, two land bordering countries, and we have very good relations with both of them, even if there's friction points now. China has what, 14, 15 bordering countries, of which they have territorial claims with all of them. And the more China grows, the more imminent the threat to these other countries they are, the more resistance there will be. So China has proven itself to be a bully to its neighbors, and this is not just modern China. This is historic China. This is China that had the mandate of heaven and enforced tributary states that forced Vietnam, Korea to pay. And Japan, it's a very unique case because obviously China tried to conquer it two times and was defeated
Well,
by.
I mean, Australia is not anywhere near China, but I mean, I think that's the whole point of why we see Trump going after the people in Venezuela. That's why we've seen the big push for the shield of the Americas to work with the South American countries. That's the whole point of going after Iran, is trying to get China's talons and stuff out of that area. And I don't see Australia partnering with Russia. They're still part of the British government last time I checked, and Britain is not going to partner with China.
Well,
So
two things there. Two things there is that okay, Russia and China already have a huge territorial dispute themselves, right, in the
uh,
Manchuria, Siberia area. So there's a point of conflict for there. You saying Australia? Yeah, it's not right next to China, but China's already used economic levers and bully mechanisms, and I'm sure the viewer from Australia knows about that to bully Australia into certain trade deals. And obviously, like Canada is one of our closest allies, but we've seen China using duplicitous means to buy its way into Canadian society and influence Canadian society. We've seen them do that in the United States with farmland. We've seen them do that in Panama with the Panama Canal. We've seen them do that in Costa Rica with the East to West Highway. We saw them do that in Africa, where they're building infrastructure to extract resources, roads to airports to send them right back to China. And we saw that again where they're doing that in Iran and Venezuela, where they're trying to build one, the Silk Road, and then two, a hostile outpost for producing, basically a place that could be used by Iran, Russia, and China in the Western Hemisphere. So,
and Robin, I agree that yes, Australia probably does a lot more trade with China than they do with America, but I still don't see that going into a militarily type um, combined, because Australia, last time I checked, is still a British nation or part of the British Empire, and Britain is not going to become an ally with China. That's not going to happen. Britain is a very strong ally of the United States. They're part of NATO. They're part of the UN. I don't see that happening. Period. I mean, yes, there's, as far as with Greenland, the Greenland is a whole other story of the Arctic threat. Because if the United States and the UN or whatever don't control Greenland, China and Russia will try to get it, and they will take it by force because of how close it is to Russia. And as the globe warms and the Arctic starts opening up, because there's really no land up there, it's all ice. There's new shipping lanes that open up, and that's a national security issue with defense from supersonic, from Russian nukes and Russians hypersonic missiles and everything, because the majority of their launching sites are in northern Russia, which literally wrap around right pretty close to Greenland. I mean, I think one of the bases is less than 100 miles. One of Russia's bases and islands is less than 100 miles from the tip of Greenland. It's not that big of a difference.
good. I do think, well, in Australian society, I'm not an expert on Australia, but I do know that they have a certain left wing element in their society. And I know that, look how they responded to COVID. So I'm not going to say they're pro China, but I will say that certainly certain elements exist within Australia that could be co-opted and allied with China. But I do think it's a civilization struggle with China. I don't see outright war ever occurring with China. Just realistic, just like outright war never occurred with the Soviet Union, just like outright war never occurred when it was Russia versus the British in the Great Game. I just when there's two, and again, I truthfully don't see China as a pure military competitor. Then we're using them to create a security dilemma to prop up our military industrial complex, right? Oh, use it as a boogeyman. They have sixth generation fighters. We need to get seventh generation fighters.
Well, we just
So,
destroyed all of their. We just destroyed their air defenses because that's literally what Iran had was Chinese Chinese and Russian air defenses, and we wiped them out in like a day. So
well, and China is aware that they can't compete with us on that level, and that's why they're doing the things like the soft fentanyl war by flooding us with fentanyl and trying to, repay the decade of or the century of humiliation with the two opium wars that the British. I think that's another factor too. Is China has a deep-seated hatred for every Western country like from the humiliation they suffered. It's culturally ingrained to them. So even if those countries wanted to be allied with China, if they're going to be allied with China, they're not going to be equal partners, right? There's a certain level of tit for
yeah,
tat, I think.
and that's why I don't see Australia. Maybe because it's more politically aligned to China, but that doesn't mean that it's going to become an ally of China because China's, like he said, doesn't even. They have a deep-seated hatred for the West. If they were to ally with you, it'd be to bully you, and it wouldn't be to get for you to be equal with them. It wouldn't be an equal partnership. And two, China's funny thing about it is they haven't really fought in any major wars that we've been in for a long time. Yeah, they've had territorial wars with people that border their countries, but even we never really fought Russia. Russia was like the Red Army that one time. That's about it. In World War II, they actually ended up fighting with us at a point to help end the Nazis and get Germany. But in none of those wars did China ever jump in. It was always Japan and Russia. And then the smaller countries, China wasn't even in any of the world wars. I mean, they assisted some militarily wise, weapons wise and stuff with supplying. I think them and Japan were fighting, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think China invaded Japan like 34, right? So
Yeah.
it
Oh,
was
China
that.
doesn't bully anyone.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they
sorry,
bully people.
Japan.
That's
Japan
it.
invaded Manchuria in 34. If I can remember correctly.
Yeah. No, that Robin said that China doesn't bully anyone.
Ask Tibet if China bullies anybody. Ask India. Ask Kashmir. Even Pakistan, which is a close ally of China now, they had open hostilities on the border less than 4 decades ago. So look at Hong Kong. Look at what happened to the free speech. So Ch- China certainly bullies people, and I think maybe on a governmental level they try to seem like they don't, but Chinese tourists have a reputation around the world for being uncouth, uh, like not paying attention, being very rude,
Yeah, but
and
just because China doesn't use physical warfare and they use psychological and they use cyber warfare and they use other ways like buying out your land and stuff to take over your country doesn't mean they don't bully. They just do it in a different form. And really the only countries the United States has ever bombed is the Middle East, which has all had to do with Russia and China and the oil that supplies the majority of the European countries like Australia, England, the EU. Because honestly, I think the United States only gets like 10% of our oil from the Gulf of Oman, from that area, from the Middle East. China gets about 20% of their oil, but the Europe and all the other the European countries and the UK get like 80-90% of their oil and gas from the Middle East. So most
here's
of the time
another.
that we're fighting over there is to help out our allies, not
Like
really us.
the Chinese government entered the WTO, the World Treaty Organization, and they abided by zero of the rules they agreed to. China has refineries that are not in line with any international regulation. Like they're one of the most heavy polluting countries. They just don't care. So how is that not bullying, right?
Well, I'm
They're
not
they
talking about Vietnam and stuff. We're
I'm
talking
not.
about current day modern.
I'm talking about China today. China today has oil refine like the amount of pollution there. Like China's agreed to all these international agreements and they abide by none of them. How is that not bullying?
Yeah.
That's
But no,
that's bullying through another method. That's okay, maybe America is more openly aggressive, maybe masculine bully in a sense, but the Chinese method is underhanded. Like truthfully,
well, we're
like
not threatening to attack Cuba, and that Cuba is pretty much being cut off from everything now that they don't have Venezuela as their friend and don't have Russia to be able to help them. They're kind of cut off from everybody. It's about ending communism. It has nothing to do about being a bully. It's taking a communistic dictator who literally has not allowed his people to have freedom or the ability to even have a growing economy and so many sanctions on them that there's bread lines on it, just like there was in Venezuela. I mean, you go look at Venezuela, there's people that have been there now since the Maduro was ousted, and the signs there in the airport are in English, Chinese, Russian, and Middle Eastern.
right.
And
So
that's in a South American country, nowhere near China or Russia or the Middle East.
yeah,
And
that's true throughout Latin America. You'll find stores all over that are owned by small Chinese shop owners, but they're really owned by the CCP. They've been sent there to do that.
oh yeah, but let's go ahead and get on to our third topic, which is obviously the DHS, which I think most people understand is they think Homeland Security, they're thinking Customs and Border Enforcement and Border Patrol, but it's not. It's also Homeland Security, Airport Security, Disaster Management. It's NSA, cybersecurity. And so, I mean, we're looking at now that Congress couldn't reach another deal on a new spending bill. This naturally raises questions about how security institutions operate when Congress won't fund them and they're about to run out of money. I mean, they've been operating on extra money that they had, but now they're almost about to run out of it. So then obviously Congress has the power to fund the government, but when does that power become a threat to national security? If pulling the leash puts Homeland Security services into a shutdown. And then obviously we saw, as you mentioned earlier today, and that I posted about earlier, is we finally saw him, Cornyn, come over and support the SAVE Act and possibly support the filibuster, the standing filibuster. But it's still like, what is stopping Thune from using the standing filibuster to reopen the DHS, get that funded so we can protect ourselves, and so DHS has the funding to protect the United States from possible Iranian sleeper cells, and having something else like that happened in New York City this past weekend, but somebody actually knows what they're doing and builds the IED correctly and it actually goes off. Because how that TAP didn't go off, I don't know. That's like, just shows you how, I mean, TAP's so volatile, it could go off from throwing it. It's insane that it didn't go off.
Well, I do know that a lot of those guides on how to make those are intentionally proliferated by our own intelligence services, and they teach them how to do it incorrectly. So
Okay,
who
and
knows?
Robin, real
I
quick,
don't know if that happened.
China, a developing nation, should have their GDP. If they were doing good, their GDP would be around 12 to 14%. They estimated a 4.5 to 5% GDP. That means they are in some serious economic trouble as a developing nation. A developed nation should be around 3 to 5% GDP. But a nation that is still developing, that's not into a developed nation yet, should still be around 10, 12, 14% GDP, which is what they have been historically since they came into the world market. So, no, China's economy is not doing better than America's right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I can't see those comments. What did she say?
I'll put it up. It just says that why is communism bad? China is doing great, much better than America economically in terms of direction.
China's also not. I there's three levels to the economy in China, and the lowest level is highly capitalistic entrepreneurial, and it was implemented after Mao Zedong went out of power. And the CCP, remember, realized that during the great, starvation period of the '60s, that if everything's controlled centrally, they can't grow enough food to feed everyone.
Okay, why is communism bad? Well, let's think about it. All right, why did Afghanistan? Well, I mean, why did Australia have to offer asylum to the women on the Iranian team? Because they were going to be hung in the town square when they got home for going against their ruler, for not singing their national anthem or standing for the national anthem. America, we don't do that. They come home just fine. We may not agree with what they say, and we say, hey, that's not the right place to do it. You need to keep your political ideals to whenever you come back to America. You don't need to be trying to do that when you're representing the whole country on a international stage. But we don't threaten to have them hung in the town square like a communist theological dictatorship like Iran does, like China would do. So I promise, while communism and socialism may sound all great when you read Mao or you read any of those books and their original ideals of what their society they're trying to build, but when you actually look at how that society came up and what actually happened versus what they said would happen, and the massive differences in those, and the massive suffering and amount of people that have been killed or sent to re-education camps or concentration camps. I mean, China right now, if you're a Muslim in China, you go to a re-education camp, and if you don't do that, you go to a hard labor camp or you get killed.
Yeah.
You get euthanized.
I mean, my criticism of communism is much along the same lines. It's based in assumption and mantra and materialism, and it says that the most important outcome is material, and that everything has to be equally owned and shared. And what that does is down the line of the logical chain, it says that the material is more important than humanity. It's material wealth is more important than human life. That is the logical outcome every single time. And if you don't believe that, again, look at history, like you just said. So me, I have a different worldview. I believe in God. I believe in a higher power, and I say that, realistically, ideally, we're just stewards of everything physically that exists. We're not the actual owners. And as immoral as personal property ownership is, what's far more immoral to me is the idea that some centralized state bureaucracy ran by a bunch of, a handful of people control everything and they decide who gets what. And we see the outcome in China. Like, look at what happens to elderly people in China. Look at what happened to people who were locked inside of their homes during COVID and couldn't get food. Do you want to be treated that way? Do you want innocent people to be treated like prisoners and criminals? No. That's why communism is bad.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's crazy that, I mean, I actually have been looking at, I was going to start reading some of the books from Mao and all them just to historically, so I can have the arguments and be able to make the arguments on it more. But I told my wife, I was like, well, I would love to have my kids maybe read this just so they could see. They're too young, and it could actually end up making them making them agree with it versus understanding what's really the whole point of having them read it for. Whether Marx, I think I was going to do read Marx's book with Marx, and I forgot what's his name, the other person he wrote it with.
Gorky.
Yeah.
Italian dude.
Yeah. But all right, so let's go into our.
Excuse me.
Yep. Oh, European. Okay, so let me go into our rapid fire segment, and it goes into the question of does let me get to the first question. I was trying to remember on the segment. The first question was, should Congress be required to authorize any major military escalation involving Iran? And so this brings us to what I think is the crux of the issue here, which concerns one of the more contentious aspects of our Constitution, the war powers. Congress has the power to declare war. The president is commander-in-chief of the military. Congress has that power declared under Article 1. Article 2, the president is declared as the commander-in-chief of the military. That is clear. Where things get murky, however, is how that plays out in practice. The Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war. That was written at the time when folks expected each side to declare war before engaging in conflict, and it often took months, if not years, to mobilize an army. The founders wanted to ensure that no single person had the power to involve the nation in protracted conflict, but times have changed. We have not had a formal declaration of war since 1942. every major conflict the United States has been involved in since, including Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and counterterrorism operations around the globe, have all been fought under presidential, not congressional authority. Now, sometimes with a congressional authorization to use military force, but seldom with an actual declaration of war. Could China attempt a move on Taiwan within the next decade? And we'll get to that in a minute, but is Joe, you back yet, or were you still talking to somebody? Because I was going to cover
I was coughing. Sorry, I was trying not to cough.
Because I just think it's funny. Everybody tries to act like Trump didn't have this authority to do what he did, and actually, because of the War Powers Act and Congress advocating those powers to the president, he does, because they know now these days they can't decide if the sky's blue or green. If we had to wait on them to make a decision, we would lose our country. We would be wiped off the face of the earth before they could decide on to declare a war.
Or they would that's exactly what we're going to do. Allow, the future enemy to prepare for it. I mean, really, the only way I could see Congress declaring war in that manner is a defensive war like occurred with Japan. But I mean, I favor going back to where Congress declares war. I'm not going to lie. I think that we should stay faithful to the Constitution, but realistically, I know that's not the case. And I also kind of dislike the fact that, both sides of the coin, Republicans and Democrats, left and right, red and blue, support wars under their presidents and then oppose them under the opposite. Like, let's have some intellectual consistency, right? Like, again, and that's why I'm not saying I can't say I support the war in Iran. I can't say I oppose it yet.
Well, and I agree. And that's another thing is, like, if you look at all the first polls that came out that showed that the majority of the American people didn't agree with the action in Iran, they didn't even know what was going on. They didn't have any of the ability to even understand. They were done literally like Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning. But a later one that was conducted by Fox was a 50-50 split. Either way, even all the other ones showed that when you looked at the Republicans, it was over 80% were in support. It was mainly along ideological lines. Less than 20% on the Democratic or independent side supported it. But also with those polls is you don't know how many real true conservatives they actually asked versus how many Democrats they asked. And then they also didn't give people enough time to actually be informed about why were the reasons for it. What was the reason for taking action now versus kicking the can down the road for another 10 years like the last 5-6 presidents have done over the last 47 years. I mean, and that's what we're looking at there is we couldn't keep kicking the can down the road. And now that we've taken out Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, we definitely cannot wait on let them stay because his son's already said that he's going to retaliate. So we have to end this now, or we're going to possibly end up in a World War III more type scenario. Because if we allow the current Iranian regime to get back to where they can let them go back to negotiating or let this end this attack, and they can start rebuilding their ballistic missile program and their nuclear enrichment program. As soon as they have a nuclear warhead and ballistic missile, they'll launch one at a couple at Israel, then start launching them in America because we know they want a worldwide caliphate. It's simple as that. I don't see what's so hard for people to want to the Democrats claim that they're they're for gay rights and that they're for women's rights and that they're for all this individual freedom, but literally everything that they are for, Iran is against. If you're gay, if you're trans, if you're lesbian, if you want to be free as a woman, you get hung if you try any of that stuff in Iran. You can't openly speak. Women can't get an education past the 8th grade. Women can't drive. They're to be barefoot and pregnant, stay at home moms, raise the family. They're to be only spoken to when they're told to speak. They can't even get anybody convicted of rape because you have to have like 5 men admit that they were raped. I mean, Sharia law is ridiculous. And somehow Democrats, all because of their hatred and their Trump derangement syndrome, they're letting it literally when they're sitting there and trying to protest in favor of Iran, they're literally going against everything they claim they believe in.
But it's really not opposed to their ideology. Like the true, like left wing, like I don't want to call them brainwashed, but I think that's the right way to describe them. Is they do view the world through a black and white lens, good and evil. If you support my sense of morality, I support you. If you don't, F you, you don't deserve to live anymore. And that's why we're seeing videos on TikTok of teachers saying, oh, Iran, don't target our people in the Middle East. Have you heard of a place called Mar-a-Lago? It's like it's sickening. It's anti-human. It's what's the matter? Like no one. I'll even harken this back to when we took out Osama bin Laden. And I was in the military. I thought it was disgusting that the people that were my age who were in college campuses were celebrating the death of. Come on, what happened to American exceptionalism? What happened to us being better? And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. America being a bully. I'm not an interventionist, but I'm a bully's bully, and I want America to be a bully's bully, and I want us to fall back on our line that we said when we took operations against Mexico and Pancho Villa. We said, if Mexico can't elect good men to lead it and create a good society, then we're going to take those bad men out, and they can figure it out on their own until they get it right. Because we don't want we have a stable system. We have a good system in our country. We're based on a good system. We shouldn't lose it, but we're not going to provide the staging grounds or stepping stones to destabilize and destroy what we have out of tolerance for evil.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's just crazy. Crazy is how that would be considered. That it just doesn't make any sense of why they keep on trying to pretend certain things and Trump's really literally doing what should be done, and then they still want to fight against it. Yeah, it's kind of funny that they do that.
That's not to knock the civil libertarians like Rand Paul and Thomas Massey. Like I did not agree with them on Venezuela because I had firsthand knowledge, but I will say they're consistent. I'm okay with that, and we need voices out there that are consistent and honestly saying what that's to me that's a sign of bravery. You don't have to agree with me on every single issue. We don't have to agree on the same actions, but like as long as we're all trying to make the place but cheering on the death of American soldiers, no, bad. That like what are you thinking? Hoping that bragging about how you're not going to get drafted. Nobody's getting drafted. People wake up. You're
Yep.
being manipulated and you're being socially programmed online. It's just crazy to think about.
All right, so let's go to question 2. Could China attempt to move on Taiwan within the next decade? The Taiwan issue is possibly the single most dangerous question in world affairs today. Taiwan is claimed by China as a runaway province. With unification consistently stated as a national goal, Beijing has never taken the option of the using military force off the table to achieve that goal. In recent years, China has increased its military activities around Taiwan. That has included everything from naval patrols to missile testing to air incursions to complex exercises designed to practice blocking or invading the island. Taken as a whole, it seems China is pursuing what is commonly known as a gray zone strategy. That is, keep the pressure turned up without tipping over into open conflict. Yet ultimately, the overall direction shows that China wants the military option available to seize Taiwan when it decides that time is right. Whether that time ever comes depends on a few conditions. First, China will have to feel confident that it can win quickly or create a fatal accomplishment before other countries can react. Second, they will have to judge the political will of the United States and its partners to get involved. Third, domestic Chinese politics plays a role too. Nationalism is tied to regime legitimacy on this issue. And so it's could it happen in the next 10 years? Yes, it's quite possible. The bigger question is if deterrence can be maintained to prevent that from happening. History has often shown wars start when deterrence fails rather than when aggression is inevitable. So that's kind of what you were talking about earlier. But I mean, do you think they would take it to as far as a war?
I think that that's a more apt analysis because again, it's the same thing that we do is that we show a willingness to do something in order to affect the outcome that we don't have to do that. So yeah, I do see China doing that, but I also say we have to look at pattern recognition. What has China done so far? We can look at this with North Korea and South Korea. They were at an open war 60 years ago. They're not in open conflict now. Why? So we should ask ourselves, looking at the demographics and buildup of Chinese society, what young men are going to want to go fight and die taking Taiwan? It's the elite, affluent sons of the CCP? No, they did that in Vietnam. They infiltrated in Vietnam, fought for the Vietnamese under a different color, and then they went back to China and they were hated. And then China immediately went to war against Vietnam and they lost. And the Chinese soldiers who went and fought for the the like, and then just knowing technology, like not a lot of young people, we see this in our country today. Many people aren't willing to fight and die for these issues. I don't think that's happening in China. Who are they going to recruit? The poor Chinese dudes working in factories? But who is willing to fight over there as well on this issue? No, I think that subversion is their method. I can see them using subversion. I don't think there is the domestic politics aspect where they say Xi Jinping wants to go down in history and he needs to make a name for himself before he's out of power by being the person who gets back Taiwan. Okay, I don't think that the Chinese have the same worldview as us. I think it's a lot of projection of Western ways of thinking onto China, and
Well,
they're very patient. They're
yeah,
extremely
but I
patient.
think if they start to see that we really get tied up in this Middle East and it starts spreading past Iran and gets to a more Middle Eastern conflict, and they start seeing like Britain and all of our more allies start joining in and it starts getting protracted, they might look at it as that as, hey, if we act, even if they do have the willingness to try to stop us, will they have the ability to stop us in time? And once we've actually gained full control, will they be able to, will they allow us to have it? Will they, would they risk a full out war with China? Which obviously we wouldn't. So that's what I just think we really got to watch while we're involved in this conflict in Iran. Depending on how protracted it gets, we really got to watch out that China then might use that as, hey, they're distracted, we can go.
So let me ask you this: Who is China's true allies? Like, okay, on paper, Russia, China, and Iran were allied, but the truth is the only uniting factor is the fact that they oppose the world hegemon, the United States. Russia has a deep-seated disliking of militant extremist Islam. They've had ethnic fights in many of the Chechnya. So Russia and Iran aren't natural allies. So I'm not shocked to see Russia's not racing to help Iran. And even if it does spread throughout the Middle East, I don't see why the United States has to increase its participation. We've done what we need to do. We've created not just air superiority, but air supremacy. So what else do we need to do? Like, if our bases weren't even over there, then we wouldn't have any risk of loss of life. We could be doing this from standoff distance at this point. I don't know why. Like, if anything,
Well,
this is
the only reason we've lost people is I think because we didn't think they were going to start randomly just shooting at every one of the Middle Eastern countries randomly. And so that's, I think, the reason why we lost 7 people, and they're all from that same attack. It was just the 7th one died after the fact, after from injuries. I think is that we just hadn't had the majority of our people pulled out. From what I understand now is all of our U.S. bases are pretty much emptied. Like the U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet's headquarters is pretty much emptied. All those, any of the naval ships are out in the ocean. They're not in the. We pretty much emptied out everything there that we have. I just don't think we had planned on them trying to attack the UAE or Oman or the United Arab Emirates or anything like that, Qatar, before Jordan, before we at the beginning they thought, okay, maybe they'll attack Israel. But like I've said before, is we see that they've dropped their attacks on Israel by like 80-90%, but they're consistently bombarding the UAE and those closer countries. I think it's because we destroyed the majority of their long-range ballistic missile systems. So all they have is their more short. They have the majority of the stuff they have left is their short range. So they're being very picky about what or how often they shoot stuff at Israel. Because if they had a bunch of long-range stuff left, that 1,000 missiles and drones a day that they're launching at the UAE would be going at Israel, not the UAE.
Well, I think again they had a plan in place that said if this happens, we're going to do this. If our C2, our command and control is taken out, then the lower levels need to follow this set of orders. And I think that's what started unfolding. And I think that's a testament to the fact that there was a certain level of decapitation that's going on in the leadership, and the leadership that was taken out. Their plan in place was to expand it into a regional war and target people in that manner. But I don't. Have you heard of this guy named Anthony Aguilar? He's running. He's a Green Beret, former Green Beret, running for Congress in North Carolina as a Green Party member. And he was on TikTok, and I heard him speaking. And one of he kind of had the same message of one, this can be World War III, and then two, that, Trump has put all these American lives in imminent danger. There's the CRAM and Erbil was destroyed. It's going to lead to great number of losses of American troops' lives. And I'm like, okay, but why is that? Who sent these people? Why are there American forces in Kurdistan or Erbil still today? Why do we have people? This is overextension. If anything, okay, we attacked Iran. It's good they were there. Please get them out of there now. We don't need to have permanent overseas bases. We don't need to have permanent military alliances, and we don't need to have permanent military opponents or enemies. Like this is all a consequence of empire, which is extra constitutional, anti-American, and quite frankly, anti-Christian, anti-human. So get what we need to get done, do what we need to do, save the lives over there, defeat this radical ideology, and then get the hell out of there and focus on our own country.
Well,
That's what I want.
I think he's laughing because we've knocked out almost their whole Navy, over 60 ships now, and they haven't put a dent in one of our ships. So to say that we're somehow, because they've taken out one or two radar or satellite stations, I think is a joke. But let's go to our one last question. So, because we've already kind of go over an hour, but should Homeland Security funding ever be subject to shutdown politics? I mean, as obviously Article 1 of the Constitution vests Congress with control of the federal purse. This power, also known as the power of the purse, is one of our primary means to check the executive branch. But there's a flaw in our system that arises when this power collides with how the federal government actually functions today. Under the Department of Homeland Security, our agencies charged with border security, aviation security, emergency management, and safeguarding our nation's leadership. In the event of a shutdown, many of these workers are expected to continue working because they are considered essential employees. Border Patrol agents, TSA scanners, Coast Guard workers, and even the the other cases, these men and women could be asked to work without assured compensation. The problem is not negotiation tactics, it's the very foundation of these agencies. But budget battles are a normal part of our republic's budgetary process. But our national security agencies should not have to face the threat of their missions being consistently disrupted by short-sighted politics. Employees' morale will decline if they're asked to continually perform their duties under the threat of uncertainty. Congress should not lose its power of the purse, but perhaps certain aspects of our national security agencies should have guaranteed funding that do not cease during the times of political wrangling. Because, I mean, we do have other guaranteed funding like that with Social Security, well, Medicaid, Medicare. That stuff is a guaranteed budget. It's not done every year. It's done every like 10 or 15 years. Do you think that maybe national security should be put on that? Because it's also the Secret Service is included in this.
I think this is a huge domestic political issue. I think that they're doing exactly what they did with the shutdown. Is they're defunding DHS, yeah, because they say they're targeting ICE. Okay, great, whatever. However, like TSA is not getting paid right now, and when we start having issues with people getting it, okay, that's also. I'm not advocating that TSA should even exist. I think that it should be separated and devolved down to the local airport level and have the state governments control, airport security. That would be ideal in my book. So when you stop being able to fly because TSA isn't getting paid, that's going to have a huge implication on our domestic economy. So Democrats, again, are intentionally sabotaging our country to make Trump look bad. And they're using social programming. Oh, ICE is bad. We're standing up against ICE. No, what you're trying to do is you're trying to foment and sow chaos and create terrible economic conditions that are going to affect the average Americans, because you know that these congressmen are flying on their private jets. Maybe not all of them, enough of them, right? So
Yeah.
that's my issue. Like, come on, like stop playing games with the livelihoods of Americans. I hate it.
Yeah, but I still think national security, because they're using this because they don't like Border Patrol or Customs Enforcement or ICE, but they're also forgetting that, like we said, FEMA is not just natural disasters. They have a whole lot of other areas that FEMA works in that's national security protection and some stuff to do with foreign, with the borders and stuff and international aspects. Plus, there's parts of our cybersecurity and NSA that are funded under this too. And it's like those areas of our government should not have to worry about going without funding. Like people who protect our president and former president should not have to worry about if they're going to get paid every month or not. I mean, the last thing they need to be worrying about is how they're going to keep their house or their mortgage or keep their kids in school when they need to be concentrating on protecting the president's life or the vice president or the secretary of state or the past former presidents and the former presidents' families. I mean, these people don't need to be worrying about if they're going to have a home to live in or not, or how they're going to pay their phone bill.
I mean, look, you're right. I mean, I don't disagree with you on the national security issue, but I do think I think they're playing a game politically, domestically, and I would reference back to the Epstein files. What did they say about JFK? They said, "Well, we're going to try to get him out of power, force him to choose to get out of power, rather than having them do what they did to JFK." And it's like, yeah. So if you defund Secret Service, what's going to end up happening to somebody along the way, right? Come
Oh,
on.
and there was even a guy today, that another person that was being interviewed that was on the Epstein files, that literally said that Trump had nothing to do with it. And this is one of Epstein's close people. We're finding out by everybody they're interviewed that Trump's name is not coming up as being anywhere tied to this. He's getting vindicated every time that they interview somebody, even from the Democrats asking, which we're finding out the only thing that the Epstein files had to do with was trying to hurt Trump. It had nothing to do with getting the victims justice. If they wanted to get the victims justice, they would have brought this up years ago during the Biden administration. They would have brought it up during the Obama administration, but they didn't. They've only been trying to use it as a way to attack President Trump and to go after him and trying to win the midterms. That's all it's for. That's why they don't want to talk about anything that's good going on, because they don't want for the midterms for the Republicans to be energized and to go out and vote. They want to try to keep their people energized. Is what it
Yeah,
has to do with.
I think Trump played the Epstein files correctly because he released it early enough that this is not going to be a huge issue going into midterms. Like, American attention span is 2 minutes long anyway, so that's just how it is. But the SAVE Act is very important. I know we've talked about that a lot. I think that if it gets, he's going to do what he needs to do to get it done. I'm really hoping he does.
Yeah.
And
We need to
I
get
think
done earlier, because while the SAVE Act, the sooner it gets passed, the more effect it will have. Because while it does require states to do certain things, it can't set up the systems for them to do it. So they have to verify and do everything themselves. They have to set up how they're going to clean their voter rolls themselves. And we've already started seeing all this stuff that's coming out of how much voter fraud that's actually been going on, and aspects of it that it's now like, how can you not see that? Even like Schumer coming out and saying, "Oh, if this happens, there'll be 20 million people taken off the voter rolls." Why? Because you're telling me that there's 20 million illegal immigrants on the voter rolls? Is that what you're saying?
Where people registered in multiple jurisdictions. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. And here's another thing too: is like, this is Iran knows that we have a midterm election going on. That's their goal. Their goal is to hold on and fight as long as possible to make sure Trump loses power, because that's how they win. Isn't that crazy? If the Democrats win, then Iran will see that as a victory. So just bear that. Like, they're trying to. He needs to be in. He needs to finish this, and then we need to focus on other things and continue to build victories into the midterms. That's what I hope happens.
Yeah. Next time I'm gonna do a little try a little theory, but also people that are watching and listening, let us know. Would y'all rather see us structure everything kind of based off of the constitutional or the policy or legal aspect of it, or more of this area? Because it feels like sometimes we get a lot more views whenever we do something based off of the Constitution or legal or policy aspects of it, which it's not impossible to do. We could pretty much cover just policy and constitutional aspects of any subject that's out there going on from week to week, pretty much. Or I guess we could do weeks where we kind of talk about the same subject, but we just cover more in depth and cover different areas, the Constitution or historical Supreme Court case precedents or whatever that we didn't cover the week before. Because I know one thing I want to get us all but the crazy thing is the official book is like $600 and it's Madison's notes. I want to get that and read it. The whole book of all his notes from the Constitutional Convention. That sucker's expensive. So I'm going to go ahead and set the closing statement out. We've been over an hour now. And so obviously we talked about 3 different stories today: a change of leadership in Iran, military forces gathering in the Pacific, and a security finance showdown in Washington. Seemingly disconnected events, but add them up and you see the push and a pull of geopolitics meeting domestic politics. America still has the capacity to project power. The question is whether our politics can handle that responsibility, or our politicians really. And that's a question that every republic faces at one point or another in their time. So for the end of the show, before we go tonight, we wanted to take a moment to say thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in to another episode of No Kings on the Hill with Dr. Law and Joe St. Clair. If you enjoyed what you heard tonight, please subscribe to our page wherever you watch or listen. If you're on YouTube, click the subscribe button on your channel and activate notifications so you'll know when new episodes drop. If you're watching on Facebook, X, Kick, or Rumble, follow us and share this episode with your friends who enjoy intellectual conversations surrounding law, policy, and geopolitics. Also, don't forget you can check out our website at nokingsonthehill.drlaw.com. There you can sign up for free with just your email and receive access to our weekly blog where we dive deeper into a lot of the topics we talk about on the show. If you'd like to become a supporter, we also offer 3 levels of membership: bronze, silver, and gold, each with added benefits. Those memberships allow us to continue expanding the program, produce more episodes each week, and spend more time on research and content creation. Lastly, we want to give a special thanks to the Patriots Prayer Network for sponsoring our show. The Patriots Prayer Network is dedicated to faith, prayer, conservative politics, and taking a stand to help strengthen the values that uphold our country. Please take the time to visit the network and learn about our other great Christian conservative voices and programs that are on the network. You can find them on the X, Rumble, and Q Broadcasting with the Patriots Prayer Network channel. We appreciate everything they do and are thankful they've chosen to partner with us. And thank you for spending some time with us tonight. We've appreciated you letting us into your life like this and engaging with us on these topics. For No Kings on the Hill and my co-host Joe St. Clair, I'm Dr. Hill Law. Thanks for watching No Kings on the Hill, and we hope to see you on the Hill next time.